So I'm going to show you some new technology. I was telling Jeff it's not very awe-inspiring that I can't figure out how to use the computer, and then I'm going to show you the new technology. But so I was working at the Capital Appeals Project, part of an office that Steve worked at a long time ago in Louisiana, and it's a terrific office, and there are a lot of great lawyers, and I noticed that we'd email around to each other and be like, so does anybody remember that motion that Bob filed, 3 years ago in the, the lustful disposition motion? And we're like, well, I don't know. No, I think you have the latest version. No, I think you have the latest version. So I started asking my friends at public defender offices across the country, like, oh, like Ted's our motions guy. Ted has all this stuff. And so we're talking about people that are overworked and too few resources. And we had Mark Bookman up here talking about cases where we don't file motions. Well, it turns out motions take a lot of time, right? You need to know the case law. You can have a form motion and just sign it and turn it in. But a good motions practice takes a lot of time. It's difficult to do when you have a lot of cases. And so it's this project started with talking to Jeff Sharon. We've had our ups and downs. We've tried like every system known to man, and we finally come up with this software program on a company called MindTouch. And so we started. Do you mind if I show them really quickly? So if you're in Kentucky, you see the Kentucky resources, but this is sort of a master account. So this is the Kentucky Public Defender's Office, and so Jeff was like. We talked about it for a little bit. I think we were both probably crazy. But Jeff thanked the Houston Institute. But in reality, Jeff took a chance with this and built this through the Kentucky state system. And it has everything from a motions bank to training manuals to court instructions, all the way, cases all the way to training videos, right? And so there's a familiar face there, Steve. And it used to be that, you have a new decision come out, confrontation clause decision. Well, next year when we all go to Vegas, for the annual meeting, at that point we'll be able to train the new lawyers. Some of the people from the office will come and it'll sort of have a trickle-down effect. Well, one of the things that Jeff's done in Kentucky is to put all of the trainings online, right, in an area where lawyers can get them and get them not by the whole day's program, but by a specific context. So, and so in Massachusetts, Kathy has begun to use this in Massachusetts, and go back. And I think she told me just today that you're using it in the.
I'm using it for everything, but in Massachusetts we've had this huge lab scandal with the drug lab. More than now it looks like 40,000 cases affected. So we have a few people who are doing the point work on this area. But everybody in the state needs to know the information, and so every single bit of discovery that we get through the litigation, every opinion, every motion, good motion that gets filed, all of that stuff is all up on this website, along with a lot of other things, but on how to litigate these cases.
And so we have it in Massachusetts, and we have it in Kentucky, and there are a few other offices and organizations. Gideon's promised, like Jeff has started to use it. But we realized that, unfortunately, we wish every office in the country had these fabulous training directors and the resources to be able to do that. And we realized that we're not going to be able to get it to as many people as we want to. And so we started talking about what we can do. And so we started to think about three things. The first thing is the new organization, the National Association that's working for public defense. What we're hoping to be able to do is we created a sort of a defender template. It might look prettier at some point than this, but and we've thought through, like, what are all the things that you would need to know, right, to try a case from the beginning when you first get it all the way through the penalty phase of a capital case and on appeal. And we sort of broke out all the different issues. And so what we tried to do this summer is we started with one thing. We started with forensic science, because we talked about the need for forensic science, and that's one of these areas that's incredibly difficult for lawyers to be able to learn, right? You have an arson case, so you need to become an expert in fire science. You have an eyewitness identification. It's all the time. You need to know all the science for eyewitness identification. It's daunting. And so we started with lawyers across the country. Jennifer Friedman at the Los Angeles Public Defender, folks at the Public Defender Service in DC in their offices, a number of folks across the country. And we paired them with students at the University of North Carolina Law School. And we decided to focus on forensics first. And we paired each student with a lawyer. And we decided since the lawyers are so busy, the lawyers would sort of send the resource and help, but the students would go first. And so let me just show you an example really quickly. So if you have fingerprint evidence, for example, you can go all the way through and you can start through a basic overview, right? And the idea is you can get a basic sense quickly and then drive down, but it's pretty detailed, right? You can go through the types of fingerprints, the collecting and processing latent prints, identifying fingerprints. And so you can get the background information, but then you could also get a number of motions that are quickly summarized for you and have additional sort of notes that explain where they come from. And our idea was we don't want form motions, right? We don't want the kind of motions, Capitol Office, especially across the country, used to hand out sort of a packet of motions. And what happens is people wouldn't even change the names, so sometimes you get like, Mr. Jones has been convicted of first-degree murder, and it's like Mr. Jones is like no longer your client, but they're fine. And so our goal here is to be able to give people the tools to sort of see what to aspire to. And what we hope to do is when we have these motions, to also be able to have a summary to talk about the critical parts, like what are the moving parts in the law, what questions do you need to ask about yourself about the client. And so we have model motions, we have appellate briefing, we have sort of your critical cases that every lawyer would need to know, we have noteworthy and favorable cases for the defense, a number of training materials, forms, checklists, legal articles, and scientific journal articles, right? Scientific reports, guides, transcripts from actual cases, lists of experts, emerging issues that are developing. And so we're starting with forensic science. We're hoping to be able to move and to get matched lawyers and law students to have, instead of just having it in Kentucky or Massachusetts, to have a community pool of issues. And finally, for capital training offices like Bookman's office in Philadelphia, we've just begun to talk with the Southern Center for Human Rights. We've just begun to talk about how in capital trial offices, a lot of times, right, the idea of trial, we've talked about it, the idea is you go to trial, right? Well, in capital cases, a lot of times the best outcome, you want to avoid trial, right? You want to be able to get a negotiated settlement for a sentence less than death. And it's a weird skill for criminal defense lawyers who aren't used to handling capital cases. It's, it's a social worker, right? You're a social worker, you're a lawyer, you're a counselor, you have to handle and balance a team. And it's a skill that we don't learn in law school, right? We don't learn doing. And so one of the things we're trying to do for these capital offices is to help them be able to sort of assemble mitigation, how to develop a mitigation case, all sorts of mental retardation, mental illness, all sorts of different types of topics. So then they're able to help the consulting. So thanks to Jeff and Kathy and others for helping the Houston Institute sort of develop this resource.
I just add that each of our agencies has its own site, and we're on this main site. And so a lot of our stuff is state specific, but where we need to go and where we're working on going is making some of these materials that are the best of our stuff that will apply broadly into a central set of pages there that anybody can get to. So Massachusetts can see the best that Kentucky is doing, and Kentucky can see the best that we're doing, and hopefully other parts of the country will get on board with this, especially through the National Association that's starting up.
And with some of your privacy law folks here, like, oh my God, I'm so worried about this. So what we did is this: we have a private server. So all of this information isn't shared with anybody else who uses MyText. None of the Fortune 500 companies, nobody. It's just our server, and then we have a redundant private server in case something happens. And so at the level of granularity, you can control who sees every page. So Jeff's training division has their own pages. Kentucky has its own page. Capital offices, capital defenders generally have their own page. The capital office specifically can have their own page. And so there's a lot of granularity. So we hope to be able to develop it over time. Thanks.